Why can't we be friends? Okay, so this kind of makes me think of Greg and Mara because Mr. Z was saying how they always butt heads, but they are very alike and they could just be friends. So why can't they just be friends? So we are starting chapter 10 and 11 today, and let's hop right in. So our learning intention for today is we are going to use text evidence along with what we already know to make inferences about our characters. We know we are successful when we can refer back to those details about the characters, use what we already know about the subject, and make an inference. So let's look at this vocabulary word. Nuisance. Yeah, it's nuisance. This is a word we've already talked about. And what is a nuisance? Do you remember? It is something that is annoying, right? So this is just something that we are bringing back up, like a neighbor's dog might keep barking, or your little brother or sister might be bothering you, and they're being a nuisance. So let's look at the foundational skill for today. We have some related words. So these words are related. So we have encouragement, discourage, courage, and encourage. And I hear a word that kind of keeps coming up in those. And we know what they have in common is cur, which means heart. So if you have courage, you have heart, and you're able to do things. So those related words are going to come up today while you are reading the story, unraveling the hieroglyphic mystery. Sounds kind of interesting. So let's go ahead and get into our story today, fourth graders. We are starting something fishy. So something fishy's going on around here. Greg was quiet in the car on the way home, and so was Mara, but it wasn't awkward. Mara's mom was perfectly happy to do all the talking. Oh, you poor dear. Let me look at, oh, such a bruise. And my Mara did this, but it was just an accident, and you know that, don't you? That it was an accident? Not like that time in first grade when you bumped Mara off the end of the sliding board, or that time you threw the snowball into her face. But still, you poor dear. It must hurt like crazy. Is that compress still cold? Good. Now you just lean back because we don't want your nose to start bleeding again. Not here in the car. Mr. Shaw would give us all black eyes if that happened. I'm only kidding. But lean back further. That's a good boy. Remember, Mara, when our Tommy got hit with a lacrosse ball, snapped his nose like a carrot. Ooh, that sounds awful. Like a carrot stick, and the blood. Oh, you would not believe it. And when I got down to the field, it was only a 5 or 6 minute drive, but by the time he got home, Greg had heard a detailed description of every major blood-producing event endured by the Shaw family over the past 15 years. His own mom was not impressed with his condition. She gave him a quick once-over and said, go put that shirt in cold water in the laundry room, then take a shower. Since I'm home a little early, I think I'm going to make lasagna for dinner. How's that sound? And that was it, from his mom. By dinner time, the bruise had spread under his left eye, and his big brothers wanted details. What do you mean an accident? Said Ross. Did you fall off the climbing wall or get hit by a baseball? What? Greg shook his head. It was somebody's hand. Edward said, some kid hit you? No, said Greg. It was just a bump, and she didn't mean to. She? Said Ross. A girl did this? That's lousy. I mean, if a guy whacks you, you can whack him back. But if it's a girl, boys, their dad's tone of voice froze the chatter. Nobody in this family whacks anyone. It was an accident, so just drop it, all right? Ross and Edward let it go, at least until after dinner. Greg was sitting at his desk doing a tally of the day's sales when both his brothers came bursting into his room. They each had painted on a black eye, and Ross, panting like he'd been running, said, hide us, me and Edward, we were outside just now, and this whole gang of tiny little girls came up and started pounding us. It was terrible. They're everywhere. And then they both fell on the floor, howling with laughter. Greg wanted to laugh too, but he didn't dare. Ross was a high school sophomore and Edward was a freshman. The slightest encouragement of their madness would prove fatal. As coldly as possible, Greg said, "Very funny," and went back to his numbers. He always did the accounting before he started his homework. Ooh, we have a focus question. What reason did Mara give for calling Greg? Ooh, so we already know Mara's about to call Greg. So why do you think Mara called? Ooh, sounds juicy. About 20 minutes later, Greg was almost done with his social studies reading when his mom called up the stairs, "Greg, telephone." He trotted out and grabbed the portable phone off the table in the hall. It was the last person he wanted to hear from. "Greg, it's me, Mara. There was an assignment in math, and you weren't there, so I thought you'd want to know." Greg said, yeah, sure. I mean, I was going to call and get it from Ted." And he thought, what? Does she think I'm so stupid that I'd miss a math assignment? But in a fairly pleasant tone of voice, he said, "So, what's the assignment? You have a pencil?" "Uh-huh." Greg had already hurried back to his room for fear that his brothers might guess he was talking to a girl. "On page 17, it's exercise B," said Mara. "All the even-numbered problems. And I could help if you don't understand it or something, because you weren't there." "No, that's okay," said Greg. "I can do it. This stuff is still review, so this is good." "Yeah, this is good." Mara said, "Mr. Z told everyone to pay special attention to the decimal points." All right, so what reason did Mara give for calling Greg? Right here, right? It says, "There was an assignment in math and you weren't there, so I thought you'd want to know." So she's saying, "Hey, I'm calling to help you out. You missed something, and I want you to know." But why do you think she's calling, guys? Let's make an inference. Some good ideas out there, fourth graders. Let's keep on reading and see if we figure anything out. "And he said he might give a quiz, which means he probably will." "Good," said Greg. "I mean, that's good to know." "Yeah, good. This is good." Alrighty, this was the longest phone conversation Greg had ever had with a female who was not his relative, or at least 30 years old, or both. Plus, Greg couldn't help remembering what Mr. Z had said, that he thought Mara found him interesting. Even with a topic as safe as a math assignment, Greg felt the strain. He was ready to sign off. Ooh, so there's something that might give you an inference. Then Mara said, "I read your comic book again. It makes my unicorn story look just awful. I know you said mine isn't a comic book, but I don't really get what that means. Probably because I haven't looked at comic books much. Tommy has some, but I never got into reading them, so I don't really know what makes them so different." Greg knew what the difference was. It was simple, because a good comic book is almost like a movie. The words of a comic book are like the script. Every panel is a little scene that moves the story ahead, and time can be speeded up or slowed down, just like in a movie. And because he understood comics, Greg almost started to explain. Then he remembered. This was Mara on the phone. Mara the copycat, Mara the idea thief, Mara the enemy. So Greg said, "Yeah, well, listen, I got to finish my social studies reading." And since he didn't want to be completely rude, Greg said, "Thanks for the math assignment." "You're welcome," Mara said. "Well, see you around." "Not if I see you first," Greg thought, but he said, "Yup, bye." And he pushed the phone's off button. Sitting there at the desk in his room, Greg knew the real reason Mara had called. It wasn't trying to help him out with his math grade. She had called to fish around for new ideas. She was trying to beat him at his own game. She was trying to get ahead, trying to figure out how to make her dumb little books better so she could make some cash. And Greg thought, nice try, weasel brain. If you think I'm going to help you make money, think again. You're on your own. Does that fit with the inference that you thought, fourth graders? Let's keep reading. Chapter 11, Notes. How come they call it a black eye? Greg stared at his face in the boys' room mirror. It was Friday morning, 3 minutes before first period, and his black eye was spectacular. Just as the nurse had predicted, the deep semicircle was mostly a rich red and purple plum color, rimmed with brownish yellow highlights that arced all the way up to his eyebrow, but there was no black at all. After the teasing from his big brothers the night before, Greg had gotten on the bus with a good idea of what to expect from the guys at school. But nothing much had happened. Each time the bus stopped, he had moved around, scouting for comic book customers, and kids had said things like, "Nice shiner," or "Rough night, huh?" Several had asked how'd that happen, and that was about all. It was a nice surprise. But as he left the washroom and made his way to Mrs. Sanborn's class, he had to work up some nerve. He had only 2 classes today with Mara. Math was one, and first period social studies was the other. He wouldn't get teased in math class. Mr. Z would see to that. But if word had gotten around that Mara had socked him, social studies would be a different story. Class began, and he could tell some kids were whispering about him. But as Mrs. Sanborn took attendance, Greg was determined not to give it another thought. And anyway, he couldn't afford to. In social studies, daydreaming was dangerous. The day after each reading assignment, Mrs. Sanborn conducted a rapid-fire question and answer session, and class participation counted as 1/4 of everyone's grade. With her teacher's edition of world culture cradled in her arm, Mrs. Sanborn began pacing around the classroom, her words firing twice as fast as her footstep. Mesopotamia is a Greek word that means what? Eileen, between the rivers. Correct. Name one of the rivers, Daniel. The Tigris River. Correct. And the other one, Brittany. The Euphrates. Correct. A larger region in the area that includes Mesopotamia, Selena. The Fertile Triangle. Half right. The complete correct name of the region, Dennis? The Fertile Crescent? Correct. Another river that's in the Fertile Crescent but not in the Mesopotamia? Greg? The Nile River? Correct. One of the greatest ancient cultures associated with the Fertile Crescent? Carl. Greg was glad to get called on so early in the Q&A session. He could relax a little now because there would probably be at least another 10 questions before Mrs. Sanborn called on him again. Like everyone else, Greg had his notebook open on his desk. They were all supposed to be taking notes, but Greg began sketching a picture of crayon, writing an animal that looked like the Sphinx. And the face on the Sphinx looked a little like Mrs. Sanborn. A folded slip of paper dropped onto Greg's desk from behind him. He quickly put his hand over it, but didn't dare turn to see who had thrown it. Mrs. Sanborn had just made a turn and was headed back in his direction. The name of the modern nation that includes the largest part of what was called Mesopotamia. Ted? Iran. Incorrect. Susan, same question. Iraq? Correct. In ancient Mesopotamia, what material was most often used for building? Enos? The teacher went past him, and Greg quickly unfolded the paper and held it flat on his notebook. It was a note. Holding his pencil, pretending to write, he read the message. I have to show you something after class. Mara. P.S. Guess what? I love comics. Greg read it again. He'd seen kids passing notes before, but no one had ever slipped one to him. Sure, it was only for Mara, but she had underlined the word love 5 times. Of course she was talking about comics. Even so, it was a lot to take in all at once. Was the most important use of clay? Greg. Writing? More specific, cuneiform writing? On clay tablets? Correct. The rivers in Mesopotamia led to the invention of what important farming practice? Henry? It was a near miss. Had Mrs. Sanborn seen the note? Had she seen the note? Because if she'd captured it and read it out loud? Greg crumpled the slip of paper in his left hand, stuffed it into his pocket, and began taking detailed notes about ancient civilization. But over 80% of his mind was worried about current events. He thought, is Mara trying to be like my friend? The answer to that seemed a lot like yes. But why? Because she loves comic books? That seemed odd and sudden. If she does want to be friends, there was no clear answer to that one. Greg felt much more comfortable thinking of Mara as a nuisance, or a competitor, or even an enemy. Mrs. Sanborn's strolling quiz finally ended. During the class discussion that followed, it would have been easy for Greg to turn around and catch Mara's eye, look her in the face, and try to see what she was thinking. But he kept taking careful notes. And when Mrs. Sanborn let them begin their reading assignment, he could have turned and pretended to borrow something from Mara. Instead, he opened his textbook. He pumped paragraph after paragraph of dusty history into his mind, trying to dry up his curiosity. Greg's concentration slipped when he remembered again what Mr. Z had said about Mara. He tried to forget all that, tried to remember his great publishing plans, tried to think about his sales figures for the week, about how he wanted to sell 100 units, about how he had to make his goal. But the end of the first period was coming, tick by talk. And then he'd have to walk out into the wide open hallway. Mara had already warned him, I have to show you something. She was going to track him down, and there was nothing he could do about it. So as Miss Sanborn dismissed the class, Greg decided all he could do was just walk out the door, head for gym class, and let the future come, and try not to get another black eye. All right, so what new ideas about Mara are introduced in these chapters? What do you guys think? Scroll back a little. So what do you guys, let's look at some of these pages. So if we look down here during this conversation, it says, I read your comic book. It makes my unicorn story look just awful. I know you said mine isn't a comic book, but I don't really get what that means. So what did we learn about Mara there? Right, she is complimenting Greg, telling him how his work is good, and she's asking him for help. So that's kind of a new side of Mara that we haven't really seen yet. And what about down here, this note? What do we learn about Mara there, guys? Yeah, you guys are killing it. She is writing him friendly notes, calling to help him. So we're kind of seeing that she's not this nuisance, this mean person that Greg thinks she is. Maybe there's something a little more there. I don't know. So what does Greg think of Mara's actions? I kind of just talked about that. What do you guys think? Do you agree with him? So back here, it said that she's trying to steal his ideas and beat him. But is that what she's doing? So what do you guys think? See you guys next time. Thanks for coming. And you guys are killing it. Keep it up. Bye.